Disclaimer.
February 27th, 2026. Mark that date. In exactly 21 days, an event begins that could destroy anyone holding silver positions. How do I know this with such certainty? Because I've seen this exact trap before. I watched it destroy the wealthiest family in America in less than a week. And right now, the same players are setting the same trap, only this time, the stakes are exponentially higher. Let me take you back to 1979. Two brothers from Texas, Nelson Bunker Hunt and William Herbert Hunt, had a vision that seemed bulletproof. They looked at silver trading around $6 an ounce and saw something the rest of Wall Street had missed. While everyone chased stocks and bonds, these brothers quietly began accumulating physical silver. Not paper contracts, not futures promises, but actual metal sitting in warehouses across the world. Within 12 months, the Hunt brothers controlled approximately 1/3 of the entire world's deliverable silver supply. Think about that for a moment. Two individuals, working mostly in secret, cornered a global commodity market. Silver prices responded exactly as you'd expect when someone removes that much supply from circulation. $6 became $10, 10 became 20. By January 1980, silver touched $50 an ounce. The Hunt brothers were sitting on paper profits exceeding $10 billion, making them arguably the richest men in America. But here's what most people don't know about that story. The Hunt brothers weren't just betting on silver's value, they understood something fundamental about our monetary system, something that made certain powerful institutions very, very nervous. They were essentially betting against the dollar at a time when America's currency was already under siege from inflation and international pressure. The brothers had studied history. They knew what happened when currencies failed. They wanted to be holding real assets when that moment arrived. Wall Street didn't panic immediately. Even the major banks initially played along, happy to facilitate the trades and collect their fees. But by early 1980, someone decided the Hunt brothers had gone too far. What happened next should terrify anyone paying attention to today's silver market. March 27th, 1980, 2 o'clock in the morning. While Americans slept, the COMEX exchange enacted emergency rule changes. Without warning, without precedent, they raised margin requirements from 10% to 75%. Let me translate that into plain English. If you wanted to hold a silver contract, you suddenly needed to deposit 7.5 times more cash than you did the day before, and this happened overnight, literally while traders were sleeping. The Hunt brothers faced an impossible choice: come up with billions in additional margin money immediately, or be forced to liquidate their positions into a market that knew they were desperate sellers. They scrambled. They liquidated other assets. They called in favors. But the trap had been set perfectly. Within 4 trading days, the Hunt brothers had lost their entire $10 billion profit, and then some. Silver prices collapsed from $50 to below $10 in a single week, an 80% crash that destroyed not just the Hunts, but thousands of smaller investors who'd followed them into the trade. The government called it necessary market regulation. They said the Hunt brothers were manipulating prices, destabilizing markets, threatening the financial system. But here's what they didn't talk about. Who was on the other side of those trades? Who benefited when the rules changed at 2 in the morning? JP Morgan sat on the short side, betting against the Hunt brothers. When silver crashed, those banks collected billions, while America's wealthiest family faced financial ruin. Now let's fast forward to today, because the parallels aren't just similar, they're almost identical, except this time the numbers are bigger and the trap is closing faster. Right now, as I'm recording this on February 6, 2026, silver is trading at $73.83. Just 8 days ago, it touched $122. That's a 40% drop in 8 days, faster than even the Hunt brothers' crash. And just like 1980, the exchanges are changing rules in real time. The CME group, which runs our commodity markets, has raised margin requirements 3 times in the past month. They just increased the deposit required per contract by $7,500, and they did it without warning, just like March 1980. Traders went to sleep thinking they had adequate margin and woke up to find they were suddenly under-collateralized. Sound familiar? But here's where it gets even more interesting. Remember JP Morgan on the short side in 1980? According to data from the CFTC, JP Morgan has been the dominant short seller in silver for years, holding massive positions betting against price increases. But something remarkable happened at the exact bottom of this recent crash. On the precise day silver bottomed at $64, JP Morgan closed out their short positions. Not gradually, not over weeks, but in a single coordinated move. They went from being the biggest bear to potentially the biggest bull, right at the mathematical low. What do they know that we don't? The similarities continue. In 1980, COMEX implemented liquidation-only rules, meaning you could sell but not buy, which guaranteed prices would fall. In 2026, we're seeing liquidity vanish from silver markets. Spreads that were normally a few cents are now dollars wide. Exchanges are imposing position limits and lower circuit breakers designed to prevent rallies. They're building the same cage they built in 1980. And just like 46 years ago, the government is invoking national security. In 1980, they said the Hunt brothers threatened financial stability. Today, the Commerce Department has quietly reclassified silver as a strategic material critical to national defense. That classification didn't exist 6 months ago. Why now? What are they preparing for? Here's another eerie parallel. In 1980, the crash started 3 weeks before the first delivery date for March contracts. Right now, we're 3 weeks away from February 27th, the first notice day for March 2026 silver futures. The Hunt brothers' empire fell apart when they actually had to deliver on their contracts, and the market realized the math didn't work. Could history be about to repeat with even more devastating consequences? Look at the institutional moves happening right now. According to CME data, JP Morgan issued 99% of deliverable silver on the same day HSBC's trading systems mysteriously crashed. The London Metal Exchange went dark for hours during peak trading. These aren't random technical glitches. These are coordinated actions by institutions that know something is coming. You might be thinking this sounds like conspiracy theory, but consider the players involved. The same banks, the same exchange mechanisms, the same government justifications, the same timeline leading up to a delivery crunch. The difference is that in 1980, the Hunt brothers were trying to corner a market that had adequate supply. Today, we're facing something far more dangerous. But there's one massive difference between 1980 and today that changes everything. When they destroyed the Hunt brothers, there was actually enough silver in the world to meet demand. Prices were high, but the metal existed. The brothers lost because the rules changed, not because they were mathematically wrong about supply. In 2026, the math tells a completely different story. This time, the metal might not exist at all. And when February 27 arrives and contracts come due, what happens when there's literally not enough silver to deliver to everyone holding a claim? That's not market manipulation. That's a mathematical impossibility, and it's about to explode in exactly 21 days. Let me give you a simple scenario that explains exactly what's happening in silver markets right now. Imagine a concert venue that's oversold tickets. 508 people have valid tickets that guarantee them a seat. They paid good money. They have contracts. But when the doors open, the venue only has 103 actual seats. What happens when everyone shows up expecting their guaranteed spot? Well, that's not a pricing problem or a liquidity issue. That's a mathematical catastrophe waiting to happen. Now, replace those ticket holders with silver futures contracts. 508 million ounces of contracts currently exist on the COMEX exchange. These aren't just speculative bets. Each contract represents a legal obligation to deliver physical silver. But here's the problem that should terrify anyone paying attention. COMEX registered silver inventory, the metal actually available for delivery, stands at just 103 million ounces as of yesterday. That's a ratio of 4.9 paper claims for every single ounce of deliverable metal. You might think that's manageable. After all, historically, most futures contracts settle in cash rather than physical delivery. Traders typically roll their positions forward or close them out before delivery dates arrive. The exchanges built their entire system on that assumption. But what happens when that assumption breaks? What happens when a significant percentage of contract holders actually demand their metal? The math doesn't just get uncomfortable. It becomes impossible. And here's the detail that makes this situation even worse. That 103 million ounces of registered inventory, roughly 50% is already spoken for, tied up in reserved contracts or earmarked for specific institutional clients. So the actual available silver for new delivery demands might be closer to 50 million ounces. Now our concert venue doesn't have 103 seats for 508 people. It has about 50 seats. And the show starts February 27th. Let me show you what's already happening, because the panic has already begun, even though most people haven't noticed yet. During the first week of January, from January 1st through 7th, COMEX registered silver inventory dropped by 33.45 million ounces in just 7 days. That's 26% of total inventory vanishing in a single week. Think about what that means. People are paying premium prices to take delivery right now, immediately, rather than waiting for March contracts to mature. Why would anyone do that unless they believed there won't be metal available in March? The hemorrhaging hasn't stopped. Between January 8th and 19th, another 24 million ounces disappeared from registered inventory. We went from 127 million ounces at the start of January to 103 million today. At this rate, by February 27th, there might not be any registered inventory left at all. The vault is emptying while everyone watches, and the people taking delivery aren't small retail investors. These are institutions, major players who clearly know something the general public doesn't. Look at what happened just last week during the first week of February. JP Morgan, the same institution that was massively short silver and helped destroy the Hunt brothers, closed their entire short position at $64 per ounce. Not 65, not 63, but at the exact mathematical bottom of this recent crash. How does a bank with billions in complex positions time the absolute low with such precision, unless they have information the rest of us do? And they didn't just close shorts. According to CFTC commitment of traders data, they've now flipped to a net long position, meaning they're betting on much higher prices ahead. If JP Morgan thinks silver is going significantly higher from $74, what do they see coming? Then there's Samsung. In early February, Samsung Electronics quietly purchased an entire silver mine in Mexico, locking up 100% of its production for the next 2 years. Not a portion of the output, not a supply agreement. They bought the whole operation. Major tech companies do not make moves like that unless they are facing a supply crisis that threatens their production lines. Samsung needs silver for their electronics, and they've clearly decided the COMEX exchange isn't a reliable source anymore. Tesla is doing something similar. According to industry sources, they're negotiating direct supply contracts with mining companies, completely bypassing commodity exchanges. Every electric vehicle Tesla produces requires approximately 100 grams of silver. Their gigafactories can't run without steady silver supply. If Elon Musk is going around COMEX and directly to mines, that tells you everything about his confidence in the exchange's ability to deliver metal in coming months. Now let's talk about the conspiracy that's hiding in plain sight, because when you look at the timeline of events over the past week, coincidence becomes impossible to believe. On February 1st and 2nd, within a 24-hour window, a series of remarkable events occurred. HSBC's electronic trading systems crashed during peak London hours. The London Metal Exchange went dark for 3 hours with no official explanation. The CME raised margin requirements to 11%, the highest level since 2011, and JP Morgan closed their short positions and flipped long. All of this within 1 day. You're supposed to believe these are unrelated technical glitches and routine market adjustments, but think about the coordination required. HSBC handles a massive portion of precious metals trading for international clients. When their systems crash, it forces liquidation of positions that can't be managed. The LME going dark means price discovery stops. Raising margin requirements forces smaller players out of positions, while institutions with deep capital can hold on. And JP Morgan timing their flip to the exact bottom of the chaos? That's not luck. That's orchestration. Here's who controls the game, and this should make you very uncomfortable. JP Morgan has handled approximately 40% of all COMEX silver deliveries over the past 6 months. They're not just a participant in the market. They essentially are the market. When you have that much control over physical deliveries and you suddenly reverse your entire position from short to long at the precise bottom, you're not reacting to market conditions. You're creating them. But the most devastating weapon in this entire situation isn't even American banks. It's China, and they've fired a shot that most people haven't fully understood yet. On January 1st, 2026, China implemented new export licensing requirements for silver. You need government approval to move silver out of China. That matters because China controls approximately 70% of global silver refining capacity. Even silver mined in other countries often goes through Chinese refineries before reaching end markets. Look at what this has done to prices. Physical silver trading in Shanghai carries a $30 per ounce premium over spot prices. You want actual metal in China? You're paying $104 per ounce, while paper silver on COMEX trades at $74. That's a $40 spread, and it's not because of shipping costs or temporary logistics issues. The market is telling you something fundamental. Physical metal and paper promises have completely disconned. One is scarce and valuable, the other is abundant and suspect. When paper silver trades at a discount to physical silver, that's not normal market arbitrage. That's broken trust. It means people who need actual metal don't believe the exchanges will deliver, so they're paying huge premiums to secure supply outside the official system. It means the paper contracts, the promises to deliver, are worth less than the metal they're supposed to represent. And it means we're approaching a moment when that gap either closes violently or the paper market simply fails to function. Think about what February 27 represents in this context. That's the first notice day for March contracts. Contract holders must declare their intention to take delivery or roll forward. If even 20% of contract holders demand physical delivery, that's 100 million ounces. But registered inventory is 103 million, and half is already reserved. The math doesn't work. It can't work. Something has to break. The exchanges have 3 options when they can't deliver. Option 1, somehow find metal that doesn't exist in their vaults. Option 2, declare force majeure and settle contracts in cash at current prices, which is effectively admitting the system failed. Option 3, change the rules, just like they did to the Hunt brothers, declaring liquidation only or imposing position limits that force sellers but prevent buyers. Every option ends badly for someone. And history suggests the someone won't be JP Morgan or the exchange itself. Now you see the math. Now you see who's playing the game and who's getting played. But here's what the banks don't want you to understand. When 508 people show up on February 27th, demanding their 103 seats, when the industrial companies and major investors discover there's no metal available to meet their contracts, when China has cut off 70% of supply and premiums are $40 over spot, what happens isn't just a price spike. It's a complete loss of faith in the paper silver market itself. And once that trust evaporates, it doesn't come back. The question isn't if this breaks. The question is how violently it breaks and whether you'll be holding paper promises or actual metal when it does. 21 days. That's how much time remains until February 27th. And I need you to understand exactly what that date means and why everything changes when it arrives. This isn't speculation or fear-mongering. This is the mechanical process of how futures contracts work and why the math we just discussed becomes unavoidable reality in 3 weeks. February 27th is the first notice day for March silver contracts. On that date, anyone holding a March contract must make a decision. Either declare your intention to take physical delivery of the metal, or roll your position forward to a later month, or close out entirely. This happens every month in commodity markets without incident. But March 2026 is different because of the supply situation we've outlined. If just 20% of contract holders demand delivery, that's 100 million ounces. Available registered inventory that's not already reserved, maybe 50 million ounces. The shortage isn't theoretical anymore. It becomes a documented fact that the exchange must somehow address. Between March 1st and 15th, the exchange has to actually deliver metal to those who demanded it. They have 3 options, and none of them are good. Option 1, deliver the silver, but they don't have it, so this requires finding metal somewhere, probably at prices far higher than current market rates. Option 2, cash settlement, which means telling contract holders, sorry, we can't deliver your metal. Here's cash instead at current prices. That's default by another name, and it destroys confidence in the entire futures market. Option 3, change the rules mid-game, just like they did to the Hunt brothers, imposing liquidation-only restrictions or force majeure clauses that let the exchange off the hook. Let me forecast what mid-March likely looks like under each scenario. If they somehow deliver the metal, silver prices probably spike to $150 to $180 per ounce, as the exchange desperately sources supply from anywhere possible. Every available ounce gets pulled into COMEX to meet delivery obligations, creating severe shortages in industrial and retail markets. If they declare cash settlement, you get the same price spike, but with added chaos, as everyone realizes futures contracts are just pieces of paper that exchanges can void when convenient. And if they change the rules with position freezes or forced liquidation, you get the 1980 playbook all over again, with prices potentially crashing first before the real shortage becomes undeniable. But here's what should terrify industrial users. While we've been focused on investors and traders, the real crisis is playing out in corporate boardrooms where companies that need silver for manufacturing are realizing they can't rely on commodity exchanges for supply, and their response tells you everything about how serious this situation has become. Samsung didn't just buy a silver mine on a whim. Electronics manufacturing requires steady, reliable silver supply. A smartphone contains approximately half a gram of silver. Samsung produces hundreds of millions of devices annually. Do the math. They need thousands of tons of silver every year. And they've clearly decided COMEX can't guarantee that supply, so they're securing entire mining operations. When a company makes a move that dramatic, bypassing established supply chains to vertically integrate raw material production, that's not normal business strategy. That's crisis response. Tesla's direct contracts with mining companies tell the same story. Every electric vehicle requires about 100 grams of silver for electrical components, battery connections, and charging infrastructure. Tesla's production targets require massive silver supply, and Elon Musk apparently doesn't trust that commodity markets will function normally in coming months. He's going straight to miners, paying premium prices to secure guaranteed supply outside the exchange system. Solar panel manufacturers face an even worse situation. Each panel requires approximately 20 grams of silver for the conductive pathways that make solar cells work. There's no substitute that performs as well at the required cost point. With solar installations accelerating globally, these manufacturers need millions of ounces monthly. What happens when they show up to exchanges in March and discover there's no metal available? Their production lines stop. Their contracts with customers default. Their businesses face existential threats. Think about the downstream effects. When Apple, Microsoft, and Nvidia can't get silver for their manufacturing, what happens to your iPhone production, your Surface tablets, your graphics cards? These aren't minor inconveniences. These are supply chain breakdowns that ripple through the entire technology sector. And the smart companies, the ones with resources and inside information, are already moving to secure supply outside normal channels. What does that tell you about what they expect to happen? Now, let's discuss the scenario nobody wants to talk about, but everyone should be preparing for: government confiscation. You might think that sounds extreme or impossible in modern America, but I need to show you the historical precedent and the framework that is already being built for exactly this outcome. April 5th, 1933. President Franklin Roosevelt signed Executive Order 6102, requiring all Americans to turn in their gold coins, gold bullion, and gold certificates to the Federal Reserve by May 1st. You had less than a month to comply. If you refused, you faced a $10,000 fine, which in 1933 was more than most people earned in a decade, or 10 years in federal prison. The government wasn't asking. They were demanding, backed by criminal penalties that would destroy your life. The justification was national emergency. America was in the depths of the Great Depression. The banking system had collapsed, and Roosevelt claimed that hoarding gold prevented economic recovery. So the government confiscated private gold at $20.67 per ounce, and then immediately revalued gold to $35, a 40% devaluation of the dollar overnight. Regular Americans lost their wealth, while the government and connected insiders knew the revaluation was coming. You might be thinking that was 93 years ago, different times, different circumstances. But the legal framework that enabled Executive Order 6102 still exists. The Trading with the Enemy Act of 1917, amended in 1933, gives the president broad authority to regulate or prohibit transactions in precious metals during declared emergencies. That law has never been repealed. The authority exists today exactly as it did in 1933. So why would they confiscate silver instead of gold this time? Because silver is strategically more important than gold in 2026. Gold is primarily monetary, a store of value and hedge against currency devaluation. But silver is both monetary and industrial. The Pentagon needs silver for missile guidance systems, radar equipment, military electronics, and drone technology. NASA needs silver for satellites and space applications. The Defense Department consumes millions of ounces annually, and those needs are growing as military technology becomes more sophisticated. Our AI data centers, the infrastructure that every tech company is racing to build, require massive amounts of silver for servers, cooling systems, and electrical components. If America can't secure silver supply for these critical systems because investors and industrial users are competing for limited supply, what do you think the government does? Do they let national security infrastructure fail? Or do they use existing legal authority to redirect private silver holdings towards strategic national needs? The framework for confiscation is already being constructed, and most people haven't noticed. Starting February 15th, 2026, just 9 days from now, the IRS reporting threshold for precious metals transactions drops from $10,000 to $3,000. At current prices, that's roughly 35 to 40 ounces of silver. Any transaction above that threshold requires dealers to report your name, social security number, address, and the exact amount you purchased or sold. The government is building a registry of who owns silver, exactly like they built a registry of gold owners before the 1933 confiscation. Why would they need that information unless they're preparing to potentially demand surrender of private holdings? You do not create detailed ownership records of a commodity unless you might need to track it down later. This isn't paranoia. This is pattern recognition based on historical precedent and current regulatory changes that serve no purpose except to enable future action against private holders. Let me give you 3 actions you need to take before February 27th, because whether we see confiscation or not, understanding your position and your options is critical right now. Action 1, know your numbers. How much silver do you actually hold? Where is it physically stored? Can the government track it through purchase records or vault storage? If you've bought through major dealers or kept metal in allocated storage programs, your holdings are documented. That might matter in coming months, and you need to understand your exposure before decisions become urgent. Action 2, understand the fundamental difference between paper silver and physical silver. If you own ETFs like SLV, you own shares in a fund that claims to hold silver on your behalf. But read the prospectus carefully. In shortage situations or force majeure events, these funds can settle in cash at their discretion. You don't own the metal. You own a promise to deliver metal if conditions allow. Futures contracts are the same. They're legally enforceable agreements, except when exchanges change rules or declare force majeure, at which point they become cash settlement at prices that might be far below market value. Physical silver, coins and bars in your possession means you're the owner. Nobody can void that with a rule change. But if it's stored in a vault, the government knows exactly where it is. Action 3. Prepare for extreme volatility in both directions. Silver could spike from $74 to $150 when the shortage becomes undeniable. Or it could crash to $40 first if exchanges force liquidation like they did in 1980, creating a panic sell-off before the real supply crisis emerges. History suggests they crash prices first, shake out weak hands, then implement confiscation when holders are demoralized and willing to surrender holdings. Don't make decisions based on short-term price moves. Understand why you hold silver and what scenario you're preparing for. Here's the pattern from 1933 that might repeat. Gold prices were relatively stable before confiscation. Then the government demanded surrender of private holdings at official prices. After collection was complete, they revalued gold much higher, which meant the dollar devalued significantly. Regular Americans sold their gold at the low price and then immediately faced higher costs for everything as dollar purchasing power dropped. The government and insiders who knew the revaluation was coming positioned themselves beforehand. If we see silver confiscation, expect the same playbook. First comes price suppression to discourage holding. Then comes mandatory surrender at depressed prices justified by national emergency. Then, after the government controls supply, prices rise dramatically as the true shortage becomes clear. By then, regular Americans no longer own the metal and can't benefit from higher prices. I'm not telling you what to do with your silver. That's your decision based on your situation and risk tolerance. But I am telling you that in 21 days, we reach a point of no return where the mathematics of this market forces resolution one way or another. The Hunt brothers thought they controlled the game in 1980. They had billions of dollars and controlled 1/3 of world supply. They were wrong. The exchange changed the rules overnight and destroyed them in 4 days. Don't repeat their mistake. Don't assume the rules will remain fair or consistent. Don't believe that your contracts will be honored if honoring them becomes inconvenient for powerful institutions. And don't think the government won't take extraordinary action if they decide private silver holdings threaten national security interests or strategic industrial needs. February 27th, first notice day, 508 million ounces of paper claims, 103 million ounces of registered inventory, half already reserved. The math doesn't lie, and it doesn't negotiate. In 21 days, we discover whether commodity markets still function or whether we are entering a new era where paper promises and physical reality have permanently divorced. The Hunt brothers learned this lesson the hard way in 1980. What happens when the entire market learns it in 2026? The clock is ticking.